that you are here tonight with us for another night of Revolution Online. Special shout out to my friends that are watching on our YouTube channel. If you are not subscribed to that, go ahead and subscribe right now. Stop what you're doing and look for us there on YouTube, Grace Youth Revolution. We are so excited for tonight. We have my friend Talia sharing a little devo with us, and then you get to hear a special chat from my friends Taylor Brown and Taylor Foley. We are so excited to hear from them tonight. Also, if you are not following our social media, go ahead and do that as well right now. Follow us on Instagram, follow our Facebook page. You can also follow us on TikTok right before that gets banned. So you can do that. Grace Youth on all of our accounts.
Hello everyone, my name is Talia, and today I'm going to be doing a student devotional. One of the questions that I really wanted to answer was, does God really listen to my prayers? And God answered this question for me through the book, Heaven is for Real. It looks kind of like this if you're interested in reading it. And it's about a little boy named Colton Burpo who had an emergency surgery for a burst appendix. And the medical staff didn't really know if Colton would make it because the situation was really, really bad. So his father, who was a pastor and previously had a miscarriage with another child, burst out at God saying, "After the leg, the kidney stones, the lumpectomy, this is how you're going to finish my time of testing? You're going to take my son?" But Colton didn't die that day. And shortly after the surgery, he confessed to his dad that Jesus had sent him back from heaven to answer his prayer. And he told his mom that he had met his sister, the child of the miscarriage. This story gave me peace, knowing that God does listen to what I have to say, even when I'm mad at him. And when I took the time to reflect on how God has been answering my prayers, I realized that my biggest blessings in life were God's answers to me to escape from the chaos in my life, such as when my family, who had dropped everything to be with me in the hospital when I had an inflamed colon. Also, another part of the story from this book that I wanted to share with you was when a woman approached the pastor asking him if God loved her miscarriage child. And he told her, "Well, if you believe God loves you as much as he loves me, and you believe he loves your living son as much as he loves my living son, don't you believe he loves your unborn child as much as he loves mine?" This helped me realize that even when there's nobody else around me, I'm not alone because God loves me. And when I thought back to the time that I spent without God's love, I realized that I had nightmares all the time, and they would never go away. I'd have them every night. But as soon as I accepted God into my life and prayed, he gave me peace, and suddenly the nightmares went away. Now I can sleep soundly at night without fear of the dark. Therefore, the verse that I wanted to talk to you about today was Psalm chapter 66, 17 through 20. "I cried out to him with my mouth. His praise was on my tongue. If I had cherished sin in my heart, the Lord would not have listened. But God has surely listened and has heard my prayer. Praise be to God, who hasn't rejected my prayer or withheld his love from me." What this verse says to me is that God doesn't reject your prayers. He listens to our prayers, and he doesn't withhold his love from us. He's always showing his love through us. So I encourage you to look in ways that God has answered your prayers and loved you in your life. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you have a wonderful day.
Hey everybody, Taylor here, and welcome to a new series that we're doing for Rev called Hello, My Name Is, and I am here with the incredible Taylor Foley. Taylor, how are you?
I'm great. How are you, TB?
Good to be here. Good to be here. Thank you for joining us too. Before we dive into all the the details of sharing your story and some inspirational stuff, we're asking over the next few weeks anyone that sits in this chair, we're asking them the same question.
Okay.
And here's the question.
Pepperoni sausage.
That would be crazy if that was your answer to this question.
That's my favorite pizza.
That would be crazy if that was the answer.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Go ahead.
But here's the question, and we did give you a little bit of so you can think on it because we want to have some good answers. If your life was being made into a movie, who would you want cast? What actor would you want cast into the role to play you?
Well, this movie would probably be a low budget movie. Like it probably have one showing a day. But if I had to pick one person, I really thought about this, about like who I am, my physique, and what I look like.
You have a prop.
I would pick Chris Hemsworth. But like Chris Hemsworth is Thor in Thor 1 and 2.
Oh, okay.
Like the body, the hair. I think it's a perfect match.
See, I was thinking Thor in Endgame. Is that the wrong?
Fat Thor? Is that what you're?
That's who I would choose.
Yeah,
for me.
he probably still has too much hair then too.
That's a good choice, though. I can see that. I can see that. Can you give me a Thor impression, though? Because that, the voice, the Loki.
There you go. I could do it. We can pull God of Thunder.
There we go. We can pull this.
That's right.
We can do this.
Favorite Avenger.
Son of
Asgard.
We're gonna lose control of this real quick. So anyway, the name of this series, as I said, is Hello, My Name Is. And so what we want to spend a few weeks doing is we want to spend a few weeks having leaders from our youth ministry and from Grace Church just come here and share their story. Because one thing that we believe in our youth ministry and our church as a whole, we believe that every single person has a story. And a fancy church word for that is testimony. We often will say, sharing your story here. And the story really has like a few different parts when we talk about it in this setting. When we talk about your story, maybe your life before you knew who God was, or before you officially like said yes officially to following Him. And there's this moment, or maybe moments over life that sort of led you to this point of following God. Then there's life after following God, and what's been the difference. And so what we wanted to spend a few weeks doing is hearing from some of our leaders and familiar faces about what your story is, and then a little bit later we're going to talk about how that translates to maybe some encouragement for teens today.
Okay.
Like what can students take away from that? But I just want to give you the floor, and we might follow up on a couple questions. But I want to give you the floor, and just would you be willing to share sort of the story of your life? Obviously we have limited time, so it's not, we can't
lay out 36 years.
We can't make the hour and a half motion picture with Chris Hemsworth.
That's right.
But
Maybe
we can.
next time.
Yeah, maybe next time. But we can't spend a little bit of time just hearing about your story, especially around maybe your teenage years and then into adulthood too.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm originally from Central Kentucky. I grew up in this little town called Versailles, Kentucky. It's spelled Versailles, but it's Kentucky, so we say it wrong.
I was going to say, isn't that said wrong or spelled wrong then?
Yeah, it's said wrong. So if you ever watch the Kentucky Derby, literally every horse grew up on a farm in my hometown.
Really?
Which is pretty cool. So I grew up in Versailles, Kentucky. I'm the last of 5 kids. Really big family. My family grew up going to church, sort of. And right before middle school, there's some things that happened in our life, and our family stopped going to church. And at that time, one of my older brothers was a college student at a school in Central Kentucky, and he invited me to come to a youth group that he was volunteering at as a small group leader. That there was this new youth pastor there that used to be his youth pastor in my hometown years ago, whose name was Wes Olds, which we all know Pastor Wes.
Sounds familiar.
That's right. And so I started going to youth group and checking it out, and really, to be honest, I didn't go because of Wes. I didn't go because I knew people there. They actually had a UK basketball player there sharing their testimony, and I'm just a wild, insane UK basketball fan. And so that's why I went. And I just got stuck. I got stuck going and really enjoyed it and started meeting people. And in, I guess, the summer between my 7th and 8th grade year, we were having an event very much like our Fuse events, where it was a summer event, and there was a guest speaker there who was actually George Acevedo, which is crazy.
Another
familiar face here at Grace Church. He was the guest speaker at this event. And I remember him talking about the story of Samuel, who was an Old Testament prophet. When he was a boy, he lived in the tabernacle. That was sort of like the church. He was an understudy, a student of the priest. And part of Samuel's story is that he kept getting woken up in the middle of the night, and God was saying his name, but he thought it was the priest saying his name. So he would get up and go wake up the priest, and the priest would be like, leave me alone, go back to bed. And he would keep saying it. And this was Samuel's calling to follow God and put his trust in God and his life in God's hands. And so George talked about how God is doing the same to us, that he may even be waking us up to put our trust in him. And I vividly remember that, and I went to an altar and prayed and accepted Christ in my life. Then, just sort of background for me in middle school, I was a super insecure kid. I was a short, fat kid who got made fun of a lot. I have pictures to show it. It was really funny looking back, but I just had so much anger in my life. I didn't fit in really anywhere. My family, I grew up in a great family, but socially I just didn't fit in, and I just was angry. Middle school is just a really difficult time. Anyways, it's probably some of the hardest seasons of our lives. And so by saying yes to Jesus, I learned that I was accepted for who I was, and because of God's love for me, He accepted me for who I was, and in following Him, I could grow in Him and push forward and really understand what it looks like to have a full and abundant life in God. And so, sort of fast forwarding into high school years, I played basketball and tennis and a bunch of other sports as well, and got more involved in my youth group. And the summer after my freshman year of high school, I went on a mission trip to the inner city of Chicago. Wes, who was my youth pastor at the time, led us there, and took a ton of high school students, and we ended up staying in this building that was a part of a church that was 3 doors down from a crack house, and it was in the most dangerous neighborhood in America at the time. Like, if you think most dangerous, that's like highest murder rate, highest assaults, highest robberies, drug use, all that. And we stayed there. Thinking about that now, that's crazy. But
high risk there.
Yeah, a lot of high risk.
Yeah.
And we were doing ministry with different churches in Chicago, and it was really cool. And it was our last night there. Wes was sharing just a message, and I felt like the Lord was speaking to me in my heart that He wanted me to do what Wes was doing. He wanted me to be a pastor. And I had all these dreams about being a doctor. My dad was a doctor, and I just sort of wanted to follow in those family footsteps. And so I really wrestled with that call in my life and actually tried to ignore it, and ended up having conversations with my small group leader and with Wes and sort of really discovering what that was. And so I started spending more time volunteering as a small group leader when I was in high school to middle schoolers. Also during that time in growing up in youth group, I met my wife, Sarah Jo. So y'all, you never know when you may meet your future spouse at youth group. But I'm just throwing that out there.
You have probably just if a student was listening and like only kind of like half hearing, you have gotten their attention.
Totally.
They're going to ask you for the secret on how to make that happen.
Yeah.
But we'll talk about that another time.
Talk about. I mean, oddly enough, you were in my youth group. And Elisa was in my youth group.
That's
so
true.
It happens sometimes. Anyway, so Sarah Jo and I grew up really as really best friends through middle school and high school, and started dating in college, and we got married. And so I went to a college in Central Kentucky, and then I went to Asbury Seminary and started working as a youth pastor in a church in Lexington. I was there for several years, and then I felt the call to move down to Florida. There was a youth pastor position open here at Grace Church, and I served as our youth pastor here for 7 years, and then transitioned into a different role here in the church. And so, yeah, it's sort of part of. We have 2 kids, Cruz and Isla Adele, and then we are in the process to adopt a son from Burundi, Africa, Zion Cedric, and we're just really waiting for international travel to open up, and then we'll go get him. And he's 6. He's awesome. 6 years old. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. And I'm always amazed, and your story is just evidence of this, and as many are. It's amazing. It just amazes me that the plan that God had and how God orchestrated so many things to be able to lead us even to right now. to be able to orchestrate that moment in middle school of saying yes to him, and that moment of calling, and that moment of the connection with Wes, and even this other connection with George too.
Right. Yeah.
I'm always just amazed at how God is able to orchestrate this day by day, even. But you never know what part of your story is going to make a difference or impact that day further on down the line.
Yeah, I mean, thinking about that, I couldn't imagine, and there have been times that I have said no to God. That's just part of the sinful nature. But I really do think, like, what would have happened if I didn't say yes to this? Like, where would my life have been different? Like, would my life have been different if I never said yes to Jesus? Well, absolutely. I wouldn't know you. I wouldn't have probably met my wife, but then also the adventure of a lifetime of just knowing that Jesus is for me. He's not against me, and he's with me, and the confidence that brings. And the same thing of saying yes to move to Florida, or saying just day in and day out, just daily saying, yes, God, I want to serve you. I want to follow you. And so if that means that you're calling me to love my neighbor in a different way, or my enemy, then I want to say yes to that, because who knows what I could be missing out on.
Yeah, that's really good. And I love how you use that example specifically, because it's not. I think sometimes we think of saying yes to this calling from God as this big, extraordinary, almost like a lifetime contract of locking into something big or going somewhere, and that's part of it. That part of it are those big moments of calls to ministry or a career or to move somewhere. But I think there's also these daily callings that God has given us, opportunities to live into what he's calling us to do, to love others, to be on mission as we go, to do some of those things as well.
Yeah.
I want to jump back and focus on a couple parts of your story, specifically in middle school.
Yeah.
Because one of the things that I think, thinking of our audience, of the people watching, of middle schoolers, high schoolers, even families that are watching this, I was wondering if you could speak to two different groups of students that are listening. The first one is I think you said this early on in your story, and I think this is a group of our students that are watching where maybe they're the only ones in their family that go to church, where maybe like they're just in a season of life where maybe they came with a friend to Revolution, or they're getting connected, but they're really the only ones in their household that really invest in their relationship with God like this. So I was wondering, sort of how was that growing up? Were there any difficult conversations, or was there any interesting conversations even between you and your parents of you going to church, but them sort of not having an interest in it? Because there are some students that I know of that fall in that category. And I was wondering if you could just speak into that, because I think that's a unique perspective. I know, like my mom and dad brought me to church. My mom and dad led out in that. So I just think that's an interesting dynamic that you have. That I wonder if you could just speak about that a little bit.
Yeah, totally. So my parents, I knew that they always supported me. They didn't care if I was going to church or if I was going to the tennis courts or whatever. They were going to support me, and they wanted to see me do well, and I knew that I was loved. And so while it was strange for me to be so heavily involved in a church and in a youth group, and for my parents not to go, there was tension there, but not tension like we were angry. It just felt off. And so something that just was important to me growing up in my teenage years is that I would pray for my family. I would want them to get connected to a church, and that's something that now my parents have. They have this church family that they love, and but it's interesting saying church family is something really important, because for me in my teenage years, I felt blessed because I had two families. I had a family that I lived with, and they got to see the good, the bad, and the ugly of me. But I also had a family in my church where I had small group leaders and youth pastors and friends that I could turn to when I was really struggling. They also saw the good, the bad, and the ugly. And so while there was this tension, it also was just sort of resting and knowing that God is for me, that God is here in this place, here at church, but he's also with me at home. He's with me at school. Something unique about my story was I lived 30 minutes away from my church, so imagine me like living in Fort Myers and coming to Grace, right? So I was really the only person in our youth group that went to my school. And so that was sort of like a mission field for me. And so for me, it was challenging of being the only person in my family going to that church that I went to. I had siblings that were going to other churches. But what I found was that this was something that I was passionate about, and I was able to express that to my family, and they, in turn, supported me. While maybe didn't make total sense or whatnot, that was something that I felt encouraged. And I just found a place of belonging in youth group. That was, there's my small group, the guys I was in small group with for 5 years in middle school and high school. I recently just got back together with them. Gosh, I've been out of high school for 17 years. And this last Thanksgiving, we all went out and got pizza together. Like, we're lifelong friends. And I hadn't seen some of them in 10 years. And it was as if nothing had changed.
Wow.
And a lot of us are married and have kids now. And so, but it was pretty cool. That was a different family for me.
Yeah, I love the parallel of the two families. Of yes, you had your family at home, but also found a family in church, and how they both sort of supported one another.
Yeah.
About how even though your parents were actively going, there was still this. There wasn't this you can't go, or they still supported even though they might not have fully understood.
Mm-hmm.
And then also this amazing church family that they were there when things with mom and dad were rocky, as every teenager knows. Things with mom and dad, and as every parent knows, things with mom and dad get rocky at times. And for them to be able to be there and support you through that too, that's just an amazing. It's a neat parallel.
Yeah.
I want to jump to the second group now. If you could just sort of talk to and encourage. I think you said at middle school they're tough years, and I think we'd be kidding ourselves if we thought that we have students watching that middle school and high school both. We'd be kidding ourselves thinking that there are some of us that are going through tough years right now.
Mm-hmm.
Of just middle school has been really hard, or maybe high school even has been really hard. And maybe they feel similar to how you felt of being this, beaten down, picked on, sort of alone, struggling. So I was wondering, could you just take a moment and just maybe encourage or just speak to, what would you say to those watching that might be in that might identify with that situation that you were in?
Yeah. So I was bullied as a kid. That was part of my story. But a couple things. Because of that, because the way that some people, not everyone, but because of the way some people treated me, I in turn treated everyone as if I try to keep arm's length distance from that. I try to be socially distanced from them before it was cool. You know what I mean?
When a virus didn't make you.
That's right, exactly. And so some of that was on me. Me being bullied, that was not on me. But the way that I would treat other people and talk to other people, that was on me. With that also, when I was in middle school, we didn't have cell phones where you could jump on social media, or pretty much what happens inadvertently if you're experiencing bullying is I at least had a home to go to.
Sure.
And I could shut off what was going on at school. Whereas middle schoolers today, high schoolers today, that deal with bullying, it can be 24/7. And so learning how to turn off our phone or ignore those things, or create those barriers are really important. But I would say for those who are struggling with bullying, for those who feel like they don't fit in, I'm going to go back to sort of my previous thing, that this place, that this community can be a family, can be a place of acceptance. Now, let me say that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get along with everyone, because that's just not how life is.
Sure.
But this is a place where everyone here is loved, they're accepted, and it was at church, it was at youth group that I found that home. But why was it at youth group that I found that home? Because what was rooted underneath there was that I had a home in Christ, that I had acceptance in Christ, and so that was the game changer for me. That if some kid was picking on me, I would in turn either ignore it, move on, or whatnot, and then realize that his words didn't define my value. Because a lot of times when we're insulted, when people are hurting our feelings, we immediately associate it to our worth, to our value. And there's only one person in the entire universe that can speak into our worth and our value. And that's our Creator. That's God. And if you look in the pages of Scripture, He has a lot of high things to say about us. And so, for me in those seasons, after I said yes to Jesus, I recognized my value wasn't determined by kids from my school or kids in my neighborhood. Instead, my value was determined by the Most High God. And while I still had bad days and whatnot, that was what was a good reminder for me moving forward. And then also really finding a family, really finding true friends in the church. And then eventually finding different friends at school too. But that was a hard lesson for me to learn.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. That's really good. And it's so true what you said about value of throughout, it's not just the verses that we know about what God says about us, but the narrative all throughout Scripture, starting at the beginning and at the end, is that there is this value, not arrogance, not anything like that, but there is this value placed within us by God, not because of anything on our resume or anything we accomplished, but just because of who we are to Him. Yeah. And that's a great reminder.
Yeah, how cool is it that the God of the universe, I mean, just think about, we can't even imagine how big the universe is, but when He created man and woman, what did He say? It's good. And to have that approval of the Most High God, the most powerful being ever. If we're playing rock, paper, scissors, and you say God, God always wins. Always wins. But that's the thing, for God to say we're good. We often, a lot of times, focus on our sin, but before sin came in the world, we were good. We were created in the image of God, and that's still within us.
Yeah. So one final question, and this is sort of a two-parter, and we're going to combine it. Is there anything that you would say now? Maybe it's a verse. Maybe it's you've talked about a couple of those big life lessons that you've sort of learned along the way. So maybe it's that, and maybe it's something else. Is there anything that you would say now to encourage students watching, particularly in the realm of maybe something that you wish you knew as a teenager that you figured out, a little while later? I know I'm starting to get to this point now where I'm starting to look back and go, oh my gosh, I wish I knew that as a middle schooler. I wish I knew that as a high schooler. And so I was wondering if you could just sort of leave students with sort of a final, encouragement or something you wish you knew when you were in middle school or high school.
Yeah. In life, there's so many times where we just want to press the fast forward button. Where we want to skip to the next scene. Or the next season, or the next year. Yeah. I know a lot of us right now are ready just to wish 2020 goodbye.
Sure. We're planning our New Year's Eve parties.
That's right. That's right. There's always a temptation to do that, but we miss out on the journey. And I think if I could go back and tell middle school Taylor, high school Taylor, or our middle schoolers and high schoolers at Rev, I would say that not only life is a journey, but life with Christ is a journey. You're not going to get it all together. And also, I think there's this temptation within us to say, well, if we've said yes to Jesus, I have youth group, I'm golden. That's all there is. But the real purpose of following after God is to have this full and abundant life. My life verse is John 10:10, where Jesus says that He has come into the world to give a full and abundant life to those who follow Him. And so for me, the reminder is that this is a journey. It doesn't mean that I'm going to make mistakes. I'm not going to always be perfect. But then also, it doesn't just end after high school when youth group's over. That was something that was stuck in my head. Like I can't imagine still following Jesus and not being a part of a youth group. And so God's vision isn't small. It's long. It's huge, and it's years and years and years. And so that's what I would encourage our middle school and high school students, that this is a journey, and that to continue to trust God in this journey day in and day out, and then it turns into weeks, months, years, and so on. And that's the dream that God has for each one of us, not to just check off the box when we say yes to Jesus, but to follow Him in this adventure.
embrace the journey.
Yeah, totally. Absolutely. Even in years like this where we're not excited about being in school and wearing masks, or we're maybe we're staying at home doing virtual school or whatever. This is a weird time. But just because it's a weird time doesn't mean that God is absent. That even more so in this time when we're at home, we're with God.
Yeah.
And I would imagine God is speaking to each one of us, and we need to take some time to pause and listen. Yeah.
Awesome. Taylor, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for sharing. We hope that you all were able to take even more than one thing. I know there's a few things I'm even taking from it, from what Taylor said. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next week. Have a good one. See you.
Guys, that was so awesome. I hope you loved that just as much as we did. I am not lying when I say that Taylor Foley and Taylor Brown are some of my favorite people in the whole world. I use the word favorite all the time, but I swear on this too. Again, follow us on social media, and if you are not subscribed to our YouTube channel, go ahead and do that right now. You can find us at Gracie Revolution, and we will see you guys next week. Bye.